here's your first look for the upcoming lesson on May the 30th, entitled Commissions. We're going to be looking at the end of Luke's Gospel this coming week for Bible study and talking about how Jesus commissions his disciples to go and share the good news that he has come back to life from the grave. It's the account where Jesus appears to his disciples in the locked upper room, and when he does so, he reassures them that he has risen from the dead. The main point of the Bible study lesson this week is that Jesus commissioned his disciples, or his followers, to proclaim the gospel. The first group Bible study lesson is outlined this way. First, Jesus assures his disciples that it really is him who has risen from the dead. And just some of the convincing proofs to point out to you as you read through these verses, Jesus could literally be seen by his disciples. He had scars from the crucifixion, proving that it was the same person who had been crucified. His body, his glorified body, consisted of flesh and bones. It could be touched. He appeared in the room without entering through a door or conventional means. He consumed food, was able to eat broiled fish and digest it, and he could speak to his disciples so they could literally hear him. So Jesus assured his disciples that he was alive, and he was the same one who had been crucified just a few days earlier. Jesus also opened their minds to understand the scriptures. In verses 44 through 46, we see Jesus doing the same thing with his disciples in the upper room that he had done with the two disciples on the road to Emmaus in last week's lesson, and explained to his disciples the things concerning himself, how the Son of Man had to be crucified and then rise from the dead. And then Jesus sent out his disciples. And here in Luke chapter 24, verses 47 through 49, we don't see the focus so much being on Jesus sending out his disciples as Jesus sending the presence, the power, the promise of the Holy Spirit who would live in his disciples and be with them as they carried this good news to the world. And the key doctrine is that Jesus was raised from the dead with a glorified body, and appeared to his disciples as the person who was with them before his crucifixion. You can see some more scriptural support for that in Matthew chapter 28, verse 9. And the reason this doctrine is so important is that it helps us understand that we too will experience a literal physical resurrection from the dead. We can rest assured that God fulfills his promises. God kept his promise to vindicate his Son after his suffering. And God will keep his promise to bring our bodies back to life if we trust in Jesus Christ. And as you wrap up the lesson and bring home the text to give people truths by which to live, focus on those points of application. Believers can rest assured of Jesus' physical resurrection. Look at those convincing proofs back in verses 36 through 43 and talk about how Jesus rose from the grave. Believers can know that God has an eternal plan to redeem his creation. This wasn't just something that God decided to do after Jesus had been crucified. God had foretold of Jesus' resurrection thousands of years before it would ever happen. As Jesus explained through the law and the prophets and the Psalms what was going to happen with the suffering of the Son of Man and his glory to follow afterwards, you can see that Jesus coming back to life wasn't just God's plan A, B, C, D, or Z. It was God's plan from the very beginning to send his Son to suffer for sin, but to bring him back from the dead as a promise of life to all who would trust in him. Believers are sent to tell all people about the forgiveness found in Jesus. When we come to him to receive salvation, he sends us out. When he cleanses us from sin, he commissions us to carry the good news to the rest of the world. And remember that he does not send us out alone. He sends us out with the power of the Holy Spirit, so we can trust that God is with us as we obey him. We will be observing the Lord's Supper Sunday morning during both worship services, 8:30 and 10:45. We'll also be taking up a community ministry offering at the conclusion of both worship services. This offering goes to help support people in need in our community in various ways, folks who come into the church office in need of something. So if you have any questions about that, I'd love to answer those for you. Hope you guys are doing well this week. I pray that your first group Bible study goes great on Sunday morning.